All right, here we go. Is this both on the video and in the room? Does this? Okay, good. Okay. All right, welcome. This is the last Tabula Poetica event of the year. Packed house. I think you all showed up in a larger number for each other than you did for the visiting poets, which is awesome. Yeah. This fall we did feature 3 amazing visiting writers, and this evening, of course, we are featuring our own MFA students. Please take a moment to silence your cell phone. So pull out that phone, make sure it's silenced. Go ahead and tweet or Instagram or whatever you want to do saying you're here having a good time. I have written an extensive introduction because I was waxing nostalgic and did not get to work with the poetry students this semester, so you are going to have to indulge me. It's like 3 pages long for the introduction. So I came to Chapman 10 years ago this fall, so in 2008. When I arrived, there were 3 full-time creative writing faculty, only 2 of whom were tenured, and all of whom were teaching fiction writing. So that was 10 years ago. There were no classes designated for poetry, and no one had talked about including creative nonfiction in the creative writing programs here. In fact, I walked into my first graduate workshop with a syllabus for a poetry class, but the students were expecting to write fiction. One student ran away as I was going over the syllabus. She returned the next year and did take the poetry workshop, but they were all freaked out. The rest of them, though, were polite enough not to mention this mismatch between my expectations and their expectations. So it actually took me a few weeks to figure out what the heck was going on and why things weren't clicking. In the end, though, it was a full class. Started out with 15, but that one ran away the first night. And out of those 14 students, 6 of them ended up doing their thesis projects in poetry. So that's an example of how quickly things started to change here, even before I got here. But the changes I've witnessed have been pretty quick as institutions go. 10 years ago, classes in the catalog were labeled either Creative Writing Workshop or Techniques in Creative Writing. So Jim Blaylock, who's here today, and I sat down that first year to map out a new curriculum that would not only start to separate the coursework by genre, but also would allow for an evolving MFA program that we could continue to grow based on the basic curriculum. One of the later innovations that I think most of you now know about was the idea for the aspects of a writer class. That came out of an informal brainstorming session at Ruby's among Doug Decco, Tom Zollner, Jim, and myself. Doug was actually, and he's upstairs at the reference desk, Doug suggested the concept of a course that would be an introduction to the writing life and the practice of writing. And basically, in that couple of hours at Ruby's, we all agreed, that's a great idea. We took it to the rest of the creative writing faculty. They said, okay, let's try it. And then Tom Zollner taught the class the following year. Since then, we've also added an expanded pub crawl, which is scheduled for April 16th in the spring this year. That extends the concepts we build in aspects into the spring semester, so it's sort of a bridge into the spring from the aspects class. We recognize that even our best MFA students weren't sending out their work, and so we wanted to keep developing programs to support and encourage that kind of aspect of your writing life. I do want to say that few institutions, I've taught elsewhere, I talk with professors elsewhere, few institutions are agile enough to respond this quickly to even simple course changes, retitling courses, adding new events. The institution I was at immediately before this, we would meet and decide things, and okay, let's try that. But every meeting ended with, we're not sure, so let's revisit that next time. But now we've done enough changes that I think other MFA programs are either consciously or inadvertently copying ours. Several programs now have an aspects-like course that is an introduction to their program. And just this fall, Northwestern University started their own dual MA MFA program, and they talk about it as if none exists anywhere else. So make sure that you're promoting that, hey, Chapman got there before Northwestern University did. When I arrived 10 years ago, the MFA program had a few small tuition waivers. When President Daniele Strupa, who was then provost, offered Richard Bausch a position, Richard negotiated the 4 MFA fellowships that included 2-year tuition waiver and a substantial stipend. That was the first fellowship we had in the program. And really, that's true across the university. There was so little funding at all for graduate students. When Carolyn Forche agreed to be a presidential fellow, so she's in her 2nd year and she'll be back next year for another year of the presidential fellowships, she negotiated an additional 2 fellowships. Very generous of both of them. Most people do not do that kind of negotiation when they're accepting positions. Jim and I worked to reorganize the scholarship money a little bit in hope of making a bigger difference for some students. And I just want to say that the current funding level is absolutely not enough, and we continue to work on that. We know that, and we're continuing to try to build a program that people will want to invest in, that will garner the kinds of funding that we'd like to give every MFA student. 10 years ago, arts was not even part of Wilkinson College's name. So we changed the name of the college under Patrick Fury. It was his idea to include arts. We had no graduate programs coordinator position in Wilkinson College. That position was created and then filled, as you all know, by the amazing Allison DeVries, and she has since come up with the GUS or GUS idea of no credit sessions that go on your transcript but you don't have to pay for. As far as I know, no other MFA program in the country does that kind of program. I expect that others will copy us very soon once the word gets out on that. 10 years ago, the university didn't even have a vice provost for graduate education, so there was no designated position to oversee graduate education in the provost's office. And then in the spring, Dr. Roxanne Miller will assume that role in January, and I think that transition at the highest levels of the university will open up new opportunities and ideas and room for discussion. So when I got here, we had 2 tenured faculty in creative writing. Now we have 7. We also have 3 full-time faculty able to contribute to our creative writing programs. Our part-time MFA faculty are well published and also good teachers. We need to figure out how to pay them more as well and keep them not only as a rotating bunch of excellent visiting writers, but also help them to achieve the career goals they want. So we have had part-time faculty in creative writing who've gone on to tremendously successful careers in full-time positions, tenured positions. We now have Tabula Poetica and Word Theater, in addition to the Fowles Reading Series. The Fowles Series, I think, was started 20 years ago. So that's been around, and that was a foundation on which we built other programming. And of course, now we have Anastamos, which is an even newer project. We have increasingly strong application pools. I think that the new aspects class was a testament to that. We have marvelous students, and that's all of you who show up to do the work with us, the faculty. Our students and graduates are publishing and going on to a variety of jobs. We'll have Publishing Crawl in the spring and talk more about that. Often in the midst of a semester, I don't feel as if things are happening fast enough. I feel like, you know, I'm not getting answers, I'm not making progress. And then this past weekend, when I started, you know, writing up the welcome notes and getting carried away, I thought about how much has happened in this 10 years, and it actually has happened very quickly. So that's why I went ahead and wrote 3 pages and wanted to take this opportunity to express how happy I am that Chapman University bothered to invest in me 10 years ago, and also how grateful I am to all of you who show up and make this program work day to day, week to week, semester to semester, and year to year. I stay here, you all go on, but there's a new crop of you every year, and it's been amazing to see what that means in individual lives. So we're all in this with a mutual investment in our futures, every one of our futures, and also more broadly in the future of reading and writing in this country. So I know you're all invested in your own careers and you're helping each other with your careers, but we're also part of investing in the much larger culture around us. Okay, so speaking of investments, here's my transition into thanking people. Most of the support for Tabula Poetica, Visiting Poets, and for the international journal Tab, which just today publicly announced its collaboration with Anastamos going forward, so check out the Tab website, most of that support comes from the English department. So I want to especially thank, guess who, our department chair, Dr. Joanna Levin, who's in the back of the room. You look like you're in a parade in one of those convertibles, sort of on the back of the convertible. I also want to thank our amazing department administrative assistants. If you haven't thanked them in person individually yet this semester, if you run into them in the next few days, make sure to thank them for this semester. That's Kristen Laxo and David Krausman. And of course, David is an alum of our MFA program. And I want to thank our MFA graduate assistants, Meg Boyles, who's going to be reading this evening, Matt Goldman, and Miriam Saeed. So congratulations to them. Leatherby Libraries and the Center for American War Letters, they're a great host for this series, and Poets and Writers has continued to support our talks and readings as well. Tonight, I'm going to start by reading a few of my own poems. And then our visiting writer who taught the poetry workshop, Genevieve Kaplan, will read a few poems from her work. If you don't yet know Genevieve's book, In the Ice House, from Red Hen Press, that's one you should get your hands on. Write that one down. Pull out your phone and put that in your notes, or pull up your IndieBound account. I also recommend you look at her website because she's doing some really, really interesting arts poetry projects. So if you don't know about book arts, if you don't know about the art poetry connection, then take a look at her website to start. After the two of us read, the graduate students from Dr. Kaplan's class and also from Dr. Martin Nickel's poetry class will read from their work. All right, so transition to my reading. I'm going to read from A Crown of Sonnets that I started working on almost exactly 10 years ago. I took certain liberties in the form from sonnet to sonnet. You can listen and see how sonnet-like or not these are. A Crown of Sonnets is a sequence of 14-line poems in which the last line of each sonnet then becomes the first line in the next sonnet, so they're sort of woven together. The 14 sonnets are crowned by a 15th poem that uses the last lines in order. So that 15th poem is the first lines from every other poem in the order that they appeared in the sequence. Luckily, I'm not going to read all 15. I think I've chosen 4. The reason I'm doing this is because I got all nostalgic about, 10 years ago I came and this is what's happened. And this is about that move from Illinois to Orange 10 years ago. And this is the end of that move so that we get to Orange at the end. So this is the 9th poem in the sequence, and it's called Mountain 2. Because the simple sound of awe does not suffice, mountains deserve more than one poem. Even though I struggle to form the language of rock that seems as alive as it is solid, as I'd like to think of myself, stable but still able. Oh, those long A's, not merely plunked down somewhere specific, but rising up, looking around, deciding how to be considerable atop Earth. The thing about mountains, though not the only thing, is that a mountain is a different body close up than from any distance. You can't both stand on it and look at it. You cannot see its whole self all at once. This is the next poem, 10, Meteorology of the Mojave Desert. You can't see the whole desert all at once because it is vast, like populations. It is the driest place in this country, so when the temperature drops 20 degrees in 3 minutes, you still do not expect rain, but it comes anyway, erasing sky and road. We could crash into the back of a semi, die in this parched place, soaked through. Rain in the Mojave is torrential. The sun undims, the storm ends, it is dry. We know to keep track. Up 32 degrees in 23 minutes, triple digits. In the rear view mirror, I see the shrubs aching to bloom as soon as we're out of sight. And then poem 12 is Mountain 3. Looking out the window, I know now what range means. Whatever an idea can encompass, the farthest distance a thing can reach. A rambling to forage, cattle for instance, or sheep, the adaptation to one's geology. The mountains just keep coming, and we keep going into them, into the clumps and clusters of silent equations, never quite hearing their fullest register, so varied, like galaxies. When the highway broadens to 6 busy lanes, ramps stream into the heavens. What if people see one another as mountains and together chart ourselves by compass? Destination, orange. I thought that traveling our guided miles would leave me in a place I recognized from television. Nothing rhymes, orange. We wander thirsty into a pub. The bartender congratulates 2 women on getting back together, and a man with a long gray hair has a 10-inch hunting knife in a leather sheath strapped to his waist. When we walk the few blocks home, we look up to find the source of squawks. Green parrots negotiating rules of drought in palm trees. We look for the space station's arc, distance. My lover says, edgier, then adds, complicated. Yes, I say, wanting it. And of course that bar was O'Hara's, right. I knew you'd all recognize it. All right, Genevieve Kaplan is next, and then we'll have the students.
So excited to be here with all of you. I think this might be my first time reading with students. I mean, my students and some extra students who are also amazing, I'm sure. So I'm really excited to be here. I have 3 poems for you today, and these are part of a sort of recent project. One of the things that I like to do, especially if you're in my class, you know, is to give myself little prompts. And so these are one of my things. Is if I'm not quite sure what to write, I take a spam line and start there. So I kind of mine my spam and go from that. 4 deferred messages found. Good, because I noticed nobody was getting in touch. First, about bananas and their placement on the counter or the kitchen. First, about production on a home. The numbers of necessary slats, power washers, etc. First, now third, about consuming substances within the body. Want pills, want food, want drinks, or an observation of how I look in the fictionalized photo posted online. Fourth, someone I know finally, but only not them, instead a bot who borrowed an identity for an hour or 2, would like to look for something somewhere, would like to know without a lens, and seeing close up the scrape or pulse of sound. Nervous? Never. Of course I am. And small items are going missing, some synapses slowly over time. How much longer could a person stay? How happy with so what little, for example? And why can't my such and such succeed? That tiny such and such I send, resend daily into that world. I'm gonna move this down a little bit. I hope you can hear me. I hope you heard all of that amazing poem. Okay. Seasonal affinity. What do you think, other in the driveway, other in the side yard, with a grass cutting machine, with a spoon, with a broom? If branches from the tree come down and someone says, well, this time I think you've really hit upon something. And the street is empty, but it fills with water when it rains. These come together. Somehow one image wants to eat the other. One detail actually manages to encompass the entirety of the other. What do you think? Black feet of a bird or dark brown feet of a bird skitter the fence, and we clutch and we clutch and we clutch and watch the alley. Signs of squirrels, the fallen trees. You want the view that extends vertically, that stretches horizontally. Maybe surprise yourself by starting with a window. Maybe begin by ducking between a building and continuing straight on through until dilution is achieved. And this last one is titled, Show Love to Polar Bears and Earn 1,000 Points. You can tell where that came from. The difference between you and everyone else, or one and everyone else, is maybe very slight. Everyone knows what a cat is. Everyone knows what a child is. Everyone knows what a prank is. Everyone knows a rose. Within this almost formulaic impression of the softened everyday, I had a misunderstanding with myself. What was seen and what was touched, and which items meant something different when set by the sea. What from the island was given an advantage? What about ants? I want for the cups, the plates, the kitchen, the structure, the mouse to last, to outlast me. Thank you. Our next reader is Meg Boyles.
I'm going to read 4 poems, one sort of meaty one, or meaty for me, and then 3 small ones. Sundown. The handkerchief folded, the language turning, the grass filled by the river too high, the dusk without supper come. Cross your feet beneath the chair, braided like an old god's long locks, thin and steel at the ends, the moon turned off. Here, stars arrive in the windows like children to say goodbye. Think of the sky's dark mouth. Reach out to steal its tongue, to pat the heads of planets. This night is a smashed berry and the peak of its season. You are walking the trail back to your name, the apricot steaming in the pan, and the mouth of the sky snaps shut. It bruises. It is stepping on thorns, immune to history. You'd like to hear the sun. You'd like to curl the impersonal like a secret and hide it in the stomach of clouds. Between our lands, gutted and edged, the air like a blue silence, the envelope ripped, the dough tracks in the yard, just left, still forming, the roots of the tree lifting up from the soil, between us, no distance at all. Okay. Projection. Of desire, you are the farm and farmer, attention a lesson, scattered by hand, Probably you think we are sharing a metaphor. Instead, our meeting. It is not enough to listen. You're sharing the fundamental despite the wind. Mother tongue. You can sleep now. The bed of the river has grown modestly, the stones now covered. It is a thing to swim through or step into. On land, I place one foot over the other like stacking dinner plates. I repackage my invisible work. In other words, the old water turns round a black willow's roots, same as last summer, as the one before. It is touching what has bordered its country forever, singing into rings. I think it is like the assuredness of stairs, witnessing being held, past evening, past memory. No words are muted and shut, no names unbearable. And this is my last one. It's a cinto, and a cinto is made by taking lines of other poems and making them into your own poem. So this poem has lines from the poets Araceli Skirmay, Nomi Stone, Natalie Shapiro, Victoria Chang, Catherine Worth, and Jane Wong. So, Cinto of God. To begin, God contracted into machine, round and plum music, the sky who wanted us dead, beautiful as old doors, and when we woke, together. I watch, assume you grow to love what you create, pouring out of your mouth. I wanted to know, why does love feel in a field outside of town, and everywhere the great green smell? So, now we have the wonderful Nana Prempe.
Thank you, Meg. Let me adjust my beanie so the camera can capture the beanie. Hi, everyone. I have 2 poems for you. Just go through these quickly. The first one is called All the Walking, Breathing, Black Graves. Excuse me. After Michael Harriot. What did America have for Thanksgiving? Black boys, broken bodies, bruised breath, bested by bullets. Beasts not boys, women not girls, black not human. The mall is safe if you can unwear the black. Ask Imantic E.J. Fitzgerald Bradford Jr. Leave it home. In your apartment is safe if you can unwear the black. Ask Botham Shem Jean. Leave it back. In your backyard is safe if you don't run. Ask Stephen Clark, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray. But you're safe if you just walk while black. Ask Amadou Diallo, Rukia Boyd, Terence Cratcher. Or maybe you don't just stand there. Don't run. Don't walk. Just drive. You are safe if you drive. If you can unwear the black, ask Sam Dubose, Sandra Bland. No car? Then don't turn your back to the police. That's just rude. Ask Dominique White, Aaron Bailey. Face the police, like Philando Castile, Michael Brown Jr. Do not breathe, Eric Garner. Do not smoke, Sandra Bland. Do not open the door, Corinne Gaines. Put your hands up is another name for you are making sudden movements, Donta Dawson. Do not reach for your driver's license, LeVar Jones. Do not carry an illegal firearm, Alton Sterling. In the not guilty words of Officer Jason Shockley, I'm going to kill this motherfucker, don't you know it? So do not carry an illegal firearm either, Philando Castile. Well, what if it's fake? Is your life fake? Do not carry a fake firearm. Tamir Rice, John Crawford. What about a perceived gun? Do not carry a perceived gun. Please. Not your iPhone, Stephen Clark. Not your prescription bottle, Remain Brisbane. Not your wallet, Amadou Diallo. Do not stand up while black, Brendan Glenn. Do not lie down while black, Natasha McKenna. Do not be too big while black, Mike Brown Jr. Do not be too small while black, Shalina Lyles. Do not be looking at an officer, Lamont Hunt. Do not be bold. Do not be broken. Do not be bruised. Do not be bullets. Do not be beautiful. Do not be black. Do not be. Do not. Do. Do you hear yourself say that it's neither your fault nor your business? Do you know any beautiful black bodies bent by bullets, by breathing? Do you know how tired this black is of being black and being banned? Sick and tired of hearing this, aren't you? Imagine how all the walking, breathing black graves feel. 99%, 2015, no convictions. My next poem is, oh, thank you. Between 364,792 and 522,000, after Nakel, How to Survive a Bombing Raid in Syria, 2018. My classmates are laughing. If we wake, not having slept on a machete, we know today is sun. My brother's arms are made of half a bomb. But our desire to mourn is as archaic as an adverb. All the action is a volcano in our lungs. California is a land bricked with Jeeps and Range Rovers. The earth splits her lips and they count. 2.5, 5.4, 7.9, 6.0, 5.5. We do not have time to count. We do not have time to crawl. What tables can we crouch under when a demon with fire for voice shrieks from the skies and tears through the hospital Alima first screamed in, and where she forgot to scream in the end? We wish the soil would crack, suck us in like yolk or yolk. We do not have time to count. 9, 7, 4, 7, 9,747, Damascus. 1, 4, 2, 2, 7, 14,227, Dara. 3, 1, 2, 5, 7, 31,257, Aleppo. 5, 5, 5, 555, Tartus. 1693, 1, 6, 9, 3, 1,693, Ahasaka. We do not have time to count. My Uncle Abdul teaching French to the first ring. My Uncle Abdul singing to the last ring. Stuck on an eternal loop in the ear that still sees the map of sizzling bodies. September 2017. Not many have died. Only 14,000 children. Mom, I don't want pancakes, I want pizza. Yo, dude, the sniper mode in this game is sick. 1, 4, 0, 0, 0. 14,000 children. Ariel, roadside, Long Beach, bomb, machine guns, grenades, missiles, hunger, torture, water, farmer, dada, never. Nafisa's almost husband has a quarter of her face left. She would bring him food if she could find her feet first. Nafisa in a boat, Nafisa on a mountain, Karim behind a white picket fence, Sifa than Aziz in a helmet, in a metal, in an armor, in an ambulance, in a Syria, in a bomb. Thank you. Thank you. The next put up to me is Julie Jenner. Kindly give her a warm welcome.
Hello. So I decided to begin my reading tonight with two poems that were inspired by the adventure of being a mother to a young child. Mother of Pearl. The Pacific wind plays havoc with your hair. You stand at the shore and cull crustaceans and shells from salty depths. You who are sea and sand and sign of the crab. You laugh at the smallest waves crawling under your tiny body and cry when they rise too high, stealing your stand. Now I see you, now I don't. I am your chosen keeper, your nacre. Layer upon layer, I protect your soft sides. You are how the invisible will be measured. For you, I must be strong and iridescent. This next poem was a response to my child's fear of the dark. And I make reference in this poem to the Po, which is a river that flows eastward across northern Italy. It's the longest river in Italy and flows into the Adriatic Sea. Entering twilight with a child. Imbrunire, verb, intransitive. To get dark, grow dark, darken. In shades of eggplant and persimmon peels, the day is sitting at our door. We can make it through nightfall. We will raft the river Po with firefly lanterns and moss fluttering to light left in our eyes. Entering twilight with all we know of day, holding hands, not haunted by stomach butterflies. When it comes, we will say, how brightly the evening darkens. The next two poems were inspired by my travels in Italy, and the first one is a short poem series about the fantastical side of Venice. Visions of Venezia. 1. Fish. 100 man-made islands shaped as two fish swimming in opposing currents. 2. Felines. Carnivores of Carnivale, under the reign of a lion. Inhabitants are not human, but felines, roaming the labyrinth at night with padded paws and tufts of fur caught in the embroidery of 18th century aristocracy. By daylight, a cat, half black, half white, scurries and disappears into the watery edges of time. 3. Merpeople. San Marco is reflected in a giant puddle. 2 pairs of black rubber boots walk on risers like acrobats performing in their aquatic circus. The city stands on stilts, on sand. The painter paints the inescapable water, and the poet seeks metaphors in dissolving architecture and shape-shifting citizens who take secret stairways to underwater hideaways. And I'll end my reading this evening with a prose poem I wrote for the Sicilian town of Taormina. The town is perched on a mountain overlooking the Ionian Sea, and it has a view of the largest active volcano in all of Europe, Mount Etna. And also I make reference to the Scirocco, which are the hot wind that blows up from Africa. Postcard for Taormina. When night comes, it falls suddenly at the sill. Mount Etna is near, and there is no divide between sky and water, no screen on my window. If I leaned my head out, the heaviness of thoughts would get the best of me. Will a clothesline catch me? Swallows, clouds of ash, a Moorish saint. I go to bed, lie there for a really long time and listen. The music of the procession through your street still echoes. Below the aloof mountain, the black man I saw today still clings to a rock, telling the fish his story. I hear it in my dreams. It's the story of Shiroko, not wanted on these shores. I am left to decipher rattling glass, howling dogs, plans of God's willing lava flow, grateful not to be at sea on nights like these. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I don't know who's following me. I don't have a list up here, so I don't know who's next. I'm sorry. Is it Nina? Okay. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you. I'm not going to introduce these. I think they speak for themselves. Musing. I lounge carelessly on my seat in front of my work table with my books, thinking a little of the poems I read, but in the main, enjoying the view from my open window where 2 feet ahead of me and on the other side of the old house's walls, it rains. Well, drizzles. There are so few droplets that they seem to cling to the Christmas tree I see. Its fern-like leaves dampened by misty rain. Patches of mud and shrub, damp and dry ground, small pools of rainwater where float the wind-blown leaves of the other trees. And the smell, I straighten up over my book and breathe through the meshy windows, a smell that to me comes straight from home, where now during the erratic monsoons, with heavy purplish clouds, poured down a musical rain, and I would sit and watch how all the natural living things, not the cement road or the family cars or the architect houses that dominate the prospect, but the old, old trees growing straight and tall and wide, hidden where cars cannot venture, with their leaves dripping the softly sounding rain, all storms eventually gentle, and fresh wet earth turned loose by this thunder shower release their smells, their wonderful earthy good and brown, earthworm and butterfly, and I all pleased with that fresh scent of it all around us, awake and brimming with life, and suddenly to be remembered of that joy, here in this indifferent town, to be transported back home by that same earthy brown smell and that same refreshing rain. Nature never did betray the heart that loved her. My next poem is called A View from a Not My San Fran House. That's when I first went to San Francisco and I was really impressed. No turn on red or green, specifically for us mere visitors, but pink bricks turn often to expensive stone-cut face, and some designer's fancy mineral taste glazes the fronts of enviable two-stories. A home here is living art, and living here is hard work. Cars drive purposely to and from my last and first window pane, and women jog past too, men in bikes, and dudes in unidentified locomotive exercise machines, all going somewhere else beyond my own dearly brought here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I was in both of the classes, the workshop and the techniques class. So this first one that I'm going to read is actually an erasure poem from The Land of Little Rain by Mary Austin. It's called Unwholesome Ground 2. The nature of that is rounded, burned and squeezed out of chaos, drowned in blue ash, streaked in the hollows of pure, thin lies, open between them, the western edges framed, to keep you, to find them, for when found, unwholesome, in a hot high, rolling long, breathless calms, where the devils cry for it, burst for violence, lost with little to come back to. And then the next two poems I will read are from my thesis, and I'm working on a fairy tale thesis. So these are kind of based off of like the Red Riding Hood tales. I know a lot of you have read a lot of them. Sorry. The first one is called What Did Your Father Do to You? The worst beast has broken from the totem, harm hibernating in his hands, half man, half morale, turned my how into a howl. The dark and the unknown, she a splurge, starved and sexed, she slim consent. He says witches live in their guts, sing scavenger of the lowest notes from scripture, the stomach now the subject. Slip a sweep of whiskey into water, to fire, to air, to earth. He thinks, what if the dead grow restless? That was a cento. That was a cento poem, by the way. And then the last one I will read is called Her Clock. Once upon a time, time was turning, because a clock is always somewhere turning. And if you look beyond your clock, it is still your clock. Of your womb, hollowed and wrestling for breath, and if you do not weep for the lost womb that crawls at your feet, it is still your womb. And all the wolves in the woods howl, and they are trapped under your branches, and they are in ruin, and nothing grows here, and there are still your branches.
Perfect. How's everyone doing? Okay. This first poem that I'm going to read is called Man Reform. Men, 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 get your men. America loves its men. More men to make America safer. More men to take out men in the wrong hands. Men the solution to men. Men in malls, men in theaters, men in churches, men in synagogues. Men anywhere we can put them. America doesn't have a man problem. Men have an America problem. It wasn't a man that killed her. After all, men don't kill. Bad people with men do. No background checks for men. Men for anyone who wants them. Man control won't do anything. Owning men, a constitutional must. Worth the loss it takes to have them, to keep them, to protect. Men, a God-given right that even God herself might think regret. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. This next one doesn't have a title. Today is the guilt of getting better, the distance of weeks, your unbelonging, the expansion of space consumed in the after. Consider many things before intention, then, of course, intention. Think the noose of maybe, dose of obvious knowing. Wonder the gap in the closet's rack, when it became thought for possibility. A place to hang things turned fantasy of gravity, of rooftop and physics certain. A pictured pendulum, the elegant dance of sway, elsewhere taunting and unknown, you so wanted to know. Curiosity, the wave that spins, insults, and swallows the body. That island thought distant, now a place for settling. How close the hands had come to shore before deciding to stay. How close the hands once were that are now not hands at all. Okay, I have one more. This poem is called After the Funeral. After the funeral, we nosh on 7-layer cake from Stage Deli, bagels and schmear and lox, and the countertops are lined with what seems like all of the arugula in the world. This endless display of all of the food Grandma taught us to love, enough to feed the entire shtetl from which her mother came. Because here nobody cries, just eats, talks, and laughs in a tone known only by those who recognize that getting over loss requires filling it with something in its place. Later, we'll mumble prayers in a language foreign enough to not know well, but familiar enough to feel like blood. Mime the service as if it is a practice not reserved for special occasions, as if God isn't only someone we know when someone dies, but really God is only someone we know when someone dies. This reformation, a string held onto with distance, just enough to be able to reel in if needed. We sit Shiva as if to remind heaven of our place there. Time and time again, we eat in the presence of death, as if to say, despite everything, Look how alive we are still. Thank you. And lastly is Carly Taylor, yay.
Gee, thanks. All right, I know you're not supposed to have favorite children, but this is one of my favorite children. Dream plane. We are on an airplane, and this is a clue. Alarm of unreality. It tilts as if to touch an impossible skyscraper. The dream physics slide up and up, skimming windows like seawater. This is after I wander the night into conclusions, not morning. Every hard science is a form of philosophy. It takes equal faith to test how as to wonder why, and still you say, why don't we try? Why don't we split an atom? Because, of course, let's fuck around and get blown up for the sake of knowing. For the sake of what's in there, when we are here bound by exquisite inexistence, gravity in space-time, skyscrapers. We fly and I wonder neither whether there are people in that building, nor if it matters. You are on the plane, and I cannot take my eyes off you. In dress after dress, because this is a dream, on every perilous edge when I reach out for your hand as I fall, when you catch me and never ask why and never ask how, and when I wake up, it has always been lifetimes. Dream lifetimes, turbulent and unbelted, your hands around my throat when the engine cuts out, our only touch. This is not about belief. This is wrenching open an atom. Let's fuck around and blow ourselves up on this dream plane, this inevitable, this color of a bruise, this instant before nothingness as our bodies come back to each other. This is years later it becomes clear, and I don't know how to read it, and I hope it doesn't show. Years later, it becomes clear there is no time in the wake of this. There is only searching. I am always searching for the loudest possible place in which not to think of what's rising up in my throat about the metal. When it bent, there was screaming in my body, screaming that died there without me. There are places I can still find which drown it, but you cannot be drowned. You are alive, so alive. You are incandescent and divine. I am beholden to your hands on me. I am the dying scream in my own chest, the rock in my own bones of speed and bruise and glass. I have thrown myself over and over to still find you in every loudest place, every potential sanctuary. I forget that you are everything, the crashing car, the fate which did not kill me. I forget you could always have killed me. I allow myself to forget. I am hit again. You are thick smoke air. You are choke. I am dying. I am tired of only ever finding more noise. I am tired of the rock in my bones. I am tired of living in a body thrown over. And because we made the mistake of allowing me to be last, we're going to end on a serial killer poem. This is called At Last, a View. Tycho Brahe dies wealthy, leaves behind the memory of a drunken moose, toppled, an agitated prodigy, his research less than promised, only that most elliptical, the god of war. Jeffrey Dahmer thanks his pen pal for her mailed gift, 2 postcards he has hung on his gray cell wall. At last, he says, a view. Johannes Kepler takes his eccentric mentor's spite, finds Mars, finds the center, finds that there is only the divine accident, oval. Charles Manson doesn't take the acid. Whispers and shouts with his whole face, nobody. Plato wonders, flawless concentricity. There are stars, there is death. The impulse to record, car crash, wander of planets, what is left? Body. Jeffrey Dahmer is fatally bludgeoned in prison. He has asked God, with witnesses, to save him from himself. The end.
So, wow, right? Usually when we do these MFA poetry readings, I've worked with at least some, if not all, of the students during the semester, and that's not the case. I know some of the students from class, but it wasn't a poetry class. And so one of the things that I usually say, and I think it applies here better, is that there's this complaint about MFA programs and the workshop sort of making all the poems sound the same and all the writers write more and more like each other, and that's never been my experience. But when I'm teaching the students and when I'm seeing poems across the semester, sometimes I think, well, that's just my perspective because I'm so close to the work and I can see the little minutia details that they're distinguishing their poems from each other's. But hearing poems that I had no idea what was going to be read, I haven't seen them before really, it strikes me that the MFA programs actually do not create McPoem. They teach students how to find their own voices, and that by having other voices in the mix, you are better able to distinguish your voice rather than imitate each other. So I think that that's really important, and a reason why we should keep having these MFA readings so that we can hear the variety of voices and encourage each individual voice. So let's wrap this up with a big round of applause for the 7 MFA poets who read this evening. And then our MFA grad assistant, Matt Goldman, has arranged for an informal social event at Provisions. We were hoping for pretzel bites, but Provisions has run out of pretzel bites today. So I think we have a meat and cheese tray. There are more people here than we expected. So I would say, you know, the sooner you get there, the more likely you are to get a piece of cheese. Okay, okay. We're rolling in the dough for the meat and cheese trays. Unfortunately, the beverages are on your own, and we have been warned that they may be a little short-staffed at Provisions, and they're not the swiftest pourers to start with. So be patient with them, and also recognize that if you want an alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage from the refrigerator, that might be quicker, so you can have that option. So see you at Provisions in a few minutes. Matt's going to head down there quickly.